So we are starting with the second session. It is my pleasure to give the floor as the coordinator of this session to Claudio D'Addario from the University of Teramo. Claudio.
Thank you, Pierluigi, for giving me the chance to chair this section that is going to be more scientific section, let's say. And it's an honor for me to introduce our guest speaker, Professor Stuppia, director of the university. I guess he's going to tell us about gene expression and environment cues, right? Okay.
Thank you very much, Claudio, and good afternoon once again. Before to start, I would like... Before to start, I would like to congratulate with Pierluigi and Riccardo, because I think that they organized something that will be a piece of history of our university, because it's something wonderful. I heard wonderful things. But let's start. And my work is medical genetics, and maybe it could be surprising that I am talking here in a meeting which is centered on culture. However, I would like to show you how epigenetics, culture, and health are strongly related, and starting from the problem, starting from the health problem. The health problem is that we have 41 million people dying each year for a group of disease which are called the non-communicable disease. This group of disease involves cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, and cancer. But all these diseases are mostly related to the problem of obesity. And what is most surprising is that we have 15 million people that die from a non-communicable disease between 30 and 69 years. So they are not old. And it has been suggested for a long time that the increase of these diseases was related to the increase of the mean lifetime. And this is not true. There is something different. There is some different kind of problem. And the most relevant problem is that we have in the world 38 million children under 5 years which are overweight or obese. So we have a real problem throughout the world, and this problem must be faced from different point of view. The question is, what does that have to do with genes and culture? And you know that obesity is a multifactorial disease deriving from the interaction of genes and environment. And this is the historical concept of multifactorial disease, in which we have a genotype, a constitutional genotype of an individual, which increase or reduce the risk at birth of a person to have a disease during his or her life. And we have the environment, and the environment can represent a factor increasing again the risk or decreasing the risk. But the old concept was that the genotype and the environment were two independent way generating the risk. Now these concepts are changing. The first concept that is changing is the environment, because now we are moving from the concept of environment to the concept of exposome. Which is the exposome? Exposome is a concept used to describe environmental exposure that an individual encounters throughout life. And these environmental factors are represented by lifestyle, by ecosystems, by physical, chemical, but also by social. And here we have social factors, including culture, that suddenly demonstrates their role in the risk of some disease, in particular non-communicable disease. And the social determinants of health are different. And here I would like to show you that education is considered as a social determinant of health, because education is strongly related with lifestyle, and is strongly related to the knowledge of what is a good lifestyle instead of a bad lifestyle. And of course, we have also community and social context, and we have the food. The food is relevant. I will tell you at the end of this relation that food is a piece of culture of a people, of a geographic location. And we have to consider food as some kind of cultural information. Now, education is and food are two concepts that seems to be very different, but they are related because we grow up passing through the education of our parents and the food that our parents provide us. And actually each geographic area should have is food which is the results of 1,000 years of selections of the kind of a lifestyle of diets that is useful for that population. Now, which is the mechanism by which social determinants impact cardiometabolic risk? And again, cardiometabolic risk involves mostly obesity. And here we are in the field of epigenetics. Epigenetics is a field of genetics very interesting because this kind of approach tells us that our genes can change their function without changing their sequence. In other words, the sequence in adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine can be identical, but that gene can be switched on or switched off by environmental factors. So now we know that our genes can be switched on or switched off by the world surrounding us. And that's the reason for which Time published some years ago discovered why your DNA isn't your destiny. Because it's not important which kind of genes we have at birth, it's important how those genes work during the life. And so the novel concept of a relation between environment and genetics is that we have DNA sequence variation which are constitutional and are our genetic background at birth, and usually this doesn't change during lifetime, but then we have environment and again food mostly that is able to induce epigenetic modification in the function of this gene. So the expression of this gene changes, and these genes, they play a different role in our life. The factors able to affect genes by an epigenetic mechanism are diet, but also psychological state, but also social interaction, but physical exercise, even financial status. All the exposome surrounding us is able to modify the action of our genes. So what happens? That chronic psychosocial and environmental stressors are able to induce epigenetic changes, which in turn are able to let's start pro-inflammatory signaling, and these have several consequences on our body because we can have problems at the sympathetic nervous system, sympathetic adrenomedullary axis, and mostly in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And here you can see that these hormones are able to increase depression and anxiety, but also pathologies which are strongly related with cardiovascular disease, such as sleep apnea, chronic stress, and depression. Most interesting is that also the immune cells are involved, and here you can see that socioeconomic disadvantage is a chronic stress able to modulate our immune system. And a very important field, childhood trauma, is really important. Childhood trauma is related to disorder of immune cells, in addition to the risk to develop a psychopathic behavior during lifetime. So we should move to facing these problems, and we can work on the social determinants of health, and of course we have to increase the physical activity, reduction of stress, diet, and so on, and the target is to improve cardiometabolic health outcomes. But it is not the entire problem, because there is another problem within the problem, and this is the problem that we have entire families in which we have a transmission of obesity and the risk of cardiovascular disease. And this is a concept which is called the transgenerational effect. In other words, we do not have here the transmission of a Mendelian model in which genes directly induce the disease, but there is something different. And in this work of my group, we identified the two specific moments. The first one is pregnancy, and the second is the lifestyle before fertilization. In these two moments, it's possible that different kind of stressors, such maternal, unhealthy diet, stress, smoke, infection, obesity, can change the epigenetic structure of the fetus's genes and change the way in which this gene will have a metabolism of the food that he will have after birth. So maternal adversity, low social status, stressful awareness, anxiety, depression, and malnutrition change by an epigenetic mechanism, and it has been demonstrated that during lifetime, the children, the offspring of these mothers have an increased risk of antisocial behavior, schizophrenia, autism, anxiety, depressive, and also an impaired attention, lower intelligence, and so on. So the behavior of the mother during pregnancy is quite important for the future of the behavior of the offspring. And this wonderful cover of Time Again tell us how the first 9 months shape the rest of your life. And all over the world, it is used this kind of prevention that is the first 1,000 days of prevention. The first 1,000 days are the pregnancy and the first and the second year. And it's very interesting that I am sorry this is in Italian because it's in the website of our Italian Minister of Health, but there is a very important point because among the different suggestions about how to care the offspring, there is read him or her a book, which is very important because it means that culture, starting from the first years of life, may have a therapeutic effect and to prevent disease, metabolic disease or behavioral disease during lifetime. But in this fantastic issue of Science of several years ago, it was demonstrated that the problem is also before pregnancy, because during lifetime, mostly in the male, the exposure to toxin, to endocrine disruptors, to smoke, to obesity is able to change the epigenetic conformation of sperm DNA, and it is able to induce the risk in the offspring of several diseases. And a problem related to obesity is that it has been demonstrated that obesity can be passed to the offspring by the sperms. And this is a very famous paper, manuscript in Nature Review Genetics, Sperm as Obesity Propagator. Why? Because it has been demonstrated that sperms in obese subjects have some modification in the genes which are able to regulate the metabolism of the offspring. So the offspring of obese male or also female have a dysregulation in their metabolism, and this can explain why we have 38 million children under 5 years which are obese, because they actually born already dysregulated in their metabolism. And we demonstrated here in this building that actually diet is able to change the sperm epigenetic conformation, since studying vegan subject, which we considered to be the other side of the coin as compared to obese, we demonstrated that they have epigenetic changes which are completely different from obese. So what we eat is able to change our sperm and the risk during a lifetime of our children. So it is important to think in terms of epigenetic diet. We know which are the elements that are useful, and we have to work in the preconceptional period before fertilization to listen, to learn couples to have a correct lifestyle before the fertilization. Also because other factors in male as well, such as the stressful environment and social isolation, can induce the risk in the adult life of the offspring of problems at cognitive, emotive, and behavior problems. So, which is the takeaway message? We have social determinants of health, which are able to induce a chronic psychosocial and environmental stress that induce a chronic inflammation and other. We can work on this kind of problem at different level in the socio-political and economic context, in the social and community context, and in the personal experience of people. So we should have policy intervention, community intervention, and individual interventions. And we have to think that we are working not only for the people of today, but also for the future generation. And in this article of my group a few years ago, we wrote that genes and diet will be crucial in the prevention of chronic disease in future generations. And you may ask, and culture? I told you, food is culture. And it's not by myself, but it's Ludwig Feuerbach that wrote several years ago that man is what he eats. And it is really important to bring again people to consume the foods which is related to its culture. It is very important. And to finish, this is my favorite record of all my life. It is from Genesis, selling by the pound, 1973. There is a song in which is said, young man says, you are what you eat well. Old man says, you are what you wear well. And of course, young people were right in the 60s. Now, maybe they are right again. But I think that if you move to the idea that our lifestyle is important for our health, but also for the health of our offspring, we can move toward a future which is better to the one that is expected at present. Thank you very much. Subito alla fine,
I don't know, we open for question now, or we do at the end? Is there any question? Yes, there are. You can go first.
Both active and passive activities can influence epigenetic changes, and in this case, if they can be propagated to future generations, and if yes, for how long?
So far, actually, we have just the negative evidence that stress can be transmitted. You probably know that the offspring of people who was in Auschwitz has a higher risk of post-traumatic stress disorder, even if they were not in Auschwitz. So we have the proof that bad experiences are transmitted. And the same happened in Rwanda after the civil war between Tutsi and Hutu. The positive effect, I don't know if Stefano Sensi is still here, but we know that culture is able to slow down the aging of brain and to prevent dementia. And this is an evidence that, of course, is not related to the transgenerational passage, but also in the individual. So the correct answer is that we have the demonstration of the damages induced by the bad experience. We hope that the positive experience can have a positive effect. And what is difficult is to study epigenetic in brain, because it's very easy in two kinds of tissues, which are sperm and placenta. So you can look at what happens in a man in the sperm, at what happens by the fecundation with that sperm in the placenta. But in brain, it's difficult. We have a lot of evidence in animal models. In animal models, we know that the pups of mice that are very effective to their offspring grow up in a very empathic way, and they are in turn more effective towards their puppets. And on the other sides, the mothers, the mice mothers that do not are effective with the pups used to have offspring which during the lifetime will have less care to their offspring. So in animal models, we have enough proof.
My question is very simple. What do you think about a good approach in proposing to the population the artificial meat? We have now sufficient data to have a rational idea of the impact in terms of wealth, and how can we propose this kind of revolutionary product to the population? We can work on the emotional side or on the rational side.
This is a very good question, because the real problem is that each time you propose to population unhealthy food, you have to face the food industry. And that's a problem, because the food industry is based on junk food. Junk food give you more profit, economical profit. And they are very, very strong. And I know that all the attempts to fight against this system so far used to fail. So the problem is that if you do not touch the interest of economic industry, you can work and you can enslave people, but there is a step, the last step, which is very dangerous. Anyway, the question was if you have to work on the feeling of people or to the brain of people. I think on the feeling of people, because food is also related to our experience or to our memory, and we have mostly to stimulate the idea of the food, most the concept of the food. So I think we should imagine some way to make people fall in love with a specific food which can be useful for their health.
This is a comment. You might want to respond, but it seems to me that there's you're telling a story where the individual and their health and their lifespan is structurally coupled to the environment. So it seems like this is a very good story to tell, where you can connect personal health to planetary health, and personal health or individual health to sustainability and ecology. So it seems like with this through line here, there's a lot of opportunity for culture to build new kinds of narratives that link personal and planetary health.
Thank you very much, because it was actually the idea. And I think that I missed to tell you the best example of this kind of story, which is the story of people in the Nauru Island in the Pacific, which were a little group of people in a very small island. It's the smallest republic in the world. Well, they are going to extinction because they changed their diet, because suddenly they discovered sugar. They didn't have sugar. Then for some reason that I have not the time to explain, they discovered the sugar. They started to eat 500 grams of sugar each day. And it is the population in the world that have the highest ratio of diabetes and obesity, and they are going to be extinguished in a few years. This is the example of what happens when you change the history of the behavior, of the culture, and of the food of a population. The Darwinian selection for the man means that you are selected if you are able to improve your sexual fitness, your reproductive fitness. And this has been selected in thousands and thousands of years through the food, mostly through the food, and the culture. When you change the culture, even in the food of a population, the reproductive fitness decreases. And this is why in Italy we are below the line of surviving, because each couple in Italy have less than 2 children. So Italian as well will extinguish in, I don't know how long, but it's a problem, because something is changed. In this case, culture is changing. In Italy, women start to think about to have children after 35 years of age, which is the age in which until 50 years ago, it was the end of the story, because they already had 1, 2, 3, 4 children. And this is a cultural aspect.
We should move to the next speaker that actually should be online. I think it's Professor Giorgio Coricelli, but we do have the connection. Hi, good afternoon, Giorgio. Welcome
Hi.
to this
Thank you.
conference. So I leave you the stage to talk.
Thank you very much. So, sorry about that. This will be very reductionist and very basic science talk. I will mainly focus on the role of reward, and this is a neuroeconomics component, on the understanding, at least, I mean, providing some hints on the neuroaesthetics, mainly the neurobiology of art and cultures, but in a very, very basic level. So the goal of my short intervention is mainly about providing how, you know, very basic model, how we move from perception is basic on the way in which anything related with art essentially enter our brain to more higher level way of thinking and then interacting also with others. So we'll start with very simple general model. Then introduce, if I have time, some aspect of creativity from a brain point of view and connecting minds. So how we actually, how the brain works when we are in our culture, through culture also could interact with others. I will start with Pierre Changer. In the long version of the talk, I had a funny story about him, but Pierre is considered essentially quite important, one of the leading person in neuroaesthetics. By the way, Changer is a very important collector of art, so probably this was also one of his motivation. And he used also in studying and investigating beauty and aesthetics and art, a hierarchical model, and this was I mean the beginning of my presentation will be about, which essentially sensory inputs again enter the brain and go up, and they can be processed, of course, by what you call the workspace neurons, which are mainly located in the prefrontal cortex, where most of the processing in the brain is happening, or higher level processing is happening, and then on the top of it, also put the reward system, which is which play a fundamental role. He used this talking about art and how also we can define and perceive and experience actually beauty through artistic experience. Let me talk about the brain as an inference machine. The idea here is that, and I'll show you the picture in a minute just to be more clear, that we extract multiple level representation from the sensory inputs. So the brain encodes hierarchical generative model, I'll tell you in a minute in a simple word, of the causes of its sensations. So the idea with the interpretation also of what we get with our senses. Where states of the world of increasing complexity and abstraction are encoded in higher and higher levels of hierarchy, and sensory data per se are encoded in the lowest level. So the idea here is that there is a world in front of us, and we, you know, unfortunately, we kind of destroyed our intervention. Sensory inputs from the external world, it penetrates our brain, and then essentially the brain is conceived, at least in the model I'm going to show you, is one way of seeing this interaction through as an inference machine. Also hierarchical inference, I'll explain in a second. And then is also an action coming from the agent to the world, in terms also selective action, meaning selective inference. So the idea is that we also look in the external world for inputs that essentially minimize what? Minimize the model that we have in our brain of the external world, the difference between our model and the reality. And this is very, very important. So the brain maintains a kind of internal predictive generative models on the way in which likely causes of sensory signals that are updated by neural processing of sensory information using methods approximating Bayesian probability. This is one way of seeing the brain, as, mainly as a Bayesian model. But the idea is this hierarchy, I think, is important to understand that sensory inputs get seen, and then these can be processed at different levels. And at each level, think about building. Each level, each floor of the building has somehow some predictions about how the inputs should. The response to the inputs that we get from the external world, and we can create also predictive, error prediction, meaning if something different happen, then we update at a very different level those prediction and the way in which we see also the external world. So the idea is that essentially we generate through this interaction an internal model of what is outside our world. What is important in all this using a Bayesian approach is that prior information is fundamental. So the way in which we perceive anything, including art, of course, it is filtered in our brain through prior information, through prior structures that make reality perceived in many different ways. Related to that, a few years ago with one of my best co-authors, we work on the theoretical model, which we essentially introduce value and the role of value reward system into this model in an explicit way. And the idea here is that the minimization was called free energy, which is the entropy, the uncertainty, the difference between our internal representation of the world, meaning that's more uncertainty, more free energy, and more essentially discomfort the brain might feel. Meaning reduction of that, of course, will generate positive, balanced emotional responses, including, for example, aesthetic, response to beauty and aesthetics. So the idea here is that these all dynamics and the transition between negative and positive states can generate this moving from one response, one emotion to another, and one balanced emotion to another. So the idea essentially is that the reward is not just the reward as economists might think about we teach and people teach in business school, but it's really the reward essentially in terms of a measure of the gap between an internal representation of the world and the external representation. I think this is very important for understanding of art and creativity. Now, another important concept here, I just introduced one of many ways in which we can use reasoning and abstract reasoning to go away to departure from reality. It's called counterfactual. And counterfactual, essentially, the idea is that most of animals, they're basic, with few neurons and very simple brains, they can survive mainly through reinforcement learning, which is essentially do an action and then you get rewarded, you keep going with the same action. But this, of course, put us really stuck us into a reality, in a single reality. Now, what about going to difference and departure from this reality, and actually without using of any hallucinogenic, any drugs? It's just through thinking. Counterfactual help us to do that. And the idea essentially is that comparing doing this comparison with reality with an alternative. So the time which an agent, and I believe humans actually do, and also other kind of animals might have done and do, the departing from reality really put us in abstract thinking, and abstract thinking elevate us to culture and artistic expression. So this is very, very important. Now, if you look in the literature, in the recent literature, and this is merely to give also to others that follow me some basic information about some basic hints about what we got in the last few years in terms of neuroscience and neurobiology of art and of creativity. Sorry, so now we are moving to the creative components of when somebody is actually creating art or creating new ideas. Here, what is clear is that what is called the high creative network, which is activated when we are creating something different, original, different from realism, different from the standard. To do that, essentially, we have this, this interaction between convergent and divergent thinking. So the idea is that, in particular, what we observe in the brain is that there are areas of the brain which are often considered antagonists, and like the default network, which has been extensively studied actually in Chieti in the last 10-15 years, the executive part of the brain and the silence or attentional system, they work all together. So great part of the brain essentially is active while we are creating something, we are expressing creativity. Example is musical improvisation. Here where we have at the top the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, of course, other motor components and the auditory components, but then the interaction and particularly connectivity with the default network, which is considered a vast part of the brain that generates essentially self-generating thoughts and ideas and self-motivated, self-generated aspects. And finally, what I would like to talk very briefly is about an economics way, a behavioral economics way of seeing social interaction, or particularly from a cognitive point of view. And I think it has a lot to do in the way in which we can perceive something and interpret something from a piece of art, but also how we can interact with others in a highly cultural and constructive way. So the idea here, the model that we've been developing in the last 20, 30 years in economics, and particularly in kind of bounded rationality approach in economics, is the idea of cognitive hierarchies. The idea is that essentially we interact with others and we attribute to other mental states, beliefs, and possible behavior at different level of cognitive hierarchy. Meaning, in simple words, I might think about you as an object, or I can think about you as a thinker, and also a sophisticated thinker, and so on and so forth. And this attribution of rationality, attribution of cognitive abilities is very, very important. So the idea is that to the way in which also we interact with the piece of art, and the interaction and what art can actually improve is our ability to think about others at a higher level. And this is extremely important. So here, of course, we use terms like in economy, like strategic, but there's nothing to do with strategic, meaning stealing money from others or making more money. But really strategic means going further, deeper in thinking about others. So it's kind of what psychology and philosophy call theory mind or mentalizing. This is a hierarchical way. And the idea is that, more we keep going and deeper we go, the more we can learn from others, and we can perceive also and think differently, and think about also different reality, a different way of interacting with other people that really is extremely important. Most of my research was funded in the last few years by DRC on a project which is about transfer learning within and between brains. Here we ask questions, simple questions, how essentially we can, within our brain, move from learn to experience from one cost and transfer essentially something we have learned in one context to another context, and then between brains also how we can transfer information to observation, to teaching, and essentially spreading our knowledge and our information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giorgio. We have time for a few questions, if there are any.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm wondering if there are more way of thinking besides convergent and divergent thinking that can explain the brain dynamics that you just explained. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, and actually also the counterfactual, I believe, is another example, right? So the convergent, divergence, I mean, I presented it. I'm not buying the story completely, because also kind of show a model of a brain which is kind of dual, right? Also, this is you have to inhibit some components of, you know, is kind of dual model level one. I mean, system one, system two kind of way of seeing how we make behavior, which is absolutely very different from what actually the way I think and the way I found in my research. So I would say yes, of course. So I presented this part was really as one way of which creativity is considered. So the idea, the common way of considering creativity, at least in the standard paradigm, is that you have two inhibits, right? So something that is a simple way of answering, and then searching for something more complex. But this is a dual view. So in my point of view, there is very little duality.
Thank you very much. I like very much the distinction between convergent and divergent thinking, and it links up with the question of language preference that we heard from Niels in the last panel, because the concept of divergent thinking, and I just want to share this with other people, I'm sure you know this, develops from studying bilingual brains, right? There's where we develop a capacity to think beyond convergence. But my question to you is whether a Kantian aesthetics is still useful to you, because Kantian aesthetics would privilege the moment after the first pleasure, the pleasure of reflecting subjectively and then intersubjectively. And I think that presents at least one opportunity for behavioral change, for political change that we're talking about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, my presentation didn't want to go that far. I mean, even though I love Kant, but now here, this is I don't know how to explain. Of course, maybe it was too reductionist, and one idea is that with the right model, particularly right model of the reward system, which is associated in this case with the pleasure responses, but not only with the pleasure itself, but also with the value, for instance, of everything we perceive, even in terms of the anticipated value of transmitting something to you, for instance, for me. So the idea here look very reductionist, but essentially is that my point is like with the right model of value and reward, we can fit most of what we observe, even something that's sometimes you might look like transcendence or extra. There's nothing extra, which is not bad. Because to me, biology by itself is beauty and is art. So, you know, there is no contradiction between art and biology. So I hope you get me right. My point is like, even everything is, I mean, not everything is value, only value. But of course, value can explain a lot about those phenomena, okay? Interacting with genetics, with how we are wired, and you know, for instance, if you observe something regular, some regularity, some features, some objective aspects of percepts and feelings, they enter our brain and directly, and they penetrate us in a way that, you know, generates value in the sense that we fit ourselves with the reality. Okay, this was the initial model I tried to present, not just to show the model, but just to show that the interaction with the external world, whatever it is, and of course art is a great part of it. When we fit what we have inside and what we have outside, then this generates positive responses.
Thank you very much. If I may add and complete what you are saying, and try to connect the two lectures we heard, epigenetic and the art creativity, it's today known that the dopaminergic signaling it's involved in creativity, and now there are studies showing that the gene regulation of dopaminergic signaling it's very well involved in how the creativity the most important artists have alteration in dopaminergic signaling in some of those genes, dopamine transporter, and are collecting and are correlated to epigenetic modulation. This is just to try to summarize what you have been listening. If we don't have any question more, I think we should move on to the next speaker. We thank you, Giorgio, very much. And we have John Kinyua from Shamiri Institute from Nairobi.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Kinyua. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us to Pescara, Italy. Sorry about that. So these are some of our team members working with us at Shamiri Institute. We are a youth-led organization, and as you can see, these are also youth. We are a for-youth, by-youth organization. We were founded by Tom Osborne and Catherine Venturo Connolly, who are both students at Harvard. And for their project, they thought, they were psychology students, so for their project, they thought, what can we do that can also benefit our community? And they came up with Shamiri Institute, so they decided to go to Kenya, back home, and design an intervention, test it, if it works, and then scale it to other parts of the country. So before they started, this is how they analyzed the problem. And as you can see, that 75% of mental health problems appear before the age of 24. So this means that students or young people who are aged between 15 to 23 experience many problems. It could stem up from academics, poverty. There are so many issues that young people go through, and they present themselves really early. But we assume that mental health issues only affect people who are adults and people who are working. And you can also see that 50%, or that is 1 in 2 adolescents, suffer from mental health related conditions, and this could be anxiety or depression. Then there is this issue about supply. So there is a shortage in the supply of experts in the least developing countries or countries like Kenya. So you'll find there is 1 expert for 1 million students or 1 million Kenyans, which is a really serious issue. And when it comes to adolescents, you'll only find there are 2 experts who are adolescent psychiatrists for 13 million students. So that is just a very serious issue. And then when you look at the treatments that are available, they're traditional, they have colonial ties with them. So you'll find in the past when people wanted to rebel against colonialism, they would be termed as people who have mental illness, they would be caged somewhere. So it has colonial ties, and that is why people really do not like seeking mental health services, because it's associated with a lot of stigma around that. The other thing is definitely they are costly. Accessing mental health services is not a priority for many people. You would rather buy food than go to access mental health services. So that is another issue that comes with traditional methods. The other thing is they are not culturally validated. So you'll find these methods are developed here in the West, and then they are just implemented in African settings, which sometimes does not work depending on the cultural context. So what Tom and Catherine wanted to do is come up with an intervention that is, first of all, affordable. It can also close in the gap of mental health experts, so like train more people who can provide care to the population, and also something that would be brief. It's not a long and costly intervention. So you'll find, maybe here in the West, you'll find someone has to go to the therapist like 10 sessions in order to start experiencing some results. So for us, we wanted to come up with a very brief intervention, because we also want students to have more time to study and do other things. So why now? As I've mentioned, almost half of the students face mental health issues, and then there was COVID, we had isolation, so you'd find students and the general population, everyone was suffering from mental health in one way or another. And then we wanted to work with community-based partners, and we've done this by partnering with various organizations. And I'm happy that one of our partners is here, Doris, and also Pierluigi. So far, we've raised over 3 million in funding. We need to adjust that. So it's a big step for us. It has helped us to reach more students. Yeah, Shamiri means thrive in Kiswahili. And our main goal is to just enable young people to come up with tools that can help them to thrive. So it can be in terms of academics, in terms of their livelihoods, in terms of their health. This is one of our programs. I'll talk about it in a few minutes. It's called Pretext, and we were implementing it in Kibera. Yeah, and all of our work is based on science. So we've published more than 20 articles in leading journals like JAMA, and we've reached over 35,000 students. We made a big jump this year when we reached 25,000 students all at once. Actually, at the moment, we are still implementing with 25,000 students. So it has been a really moment of growth for us, considering when we were founded in 2018, we just started with 40 students, and now we are approaching 40,000 students. So how does this work? We have 3 parts of how our organization works, or how we plan our work. And the first part is on the content itself. So we have data-driven character strength interventions. I'll talk more about this in the next slide. And then we have our 3-tier model, which has supervisors, which has youth lay providers at the bottom. We call them fellows. And we have clinical supervisors, and then we have clinical experts. Just as it is illustrated here, the numbers, you'll find the youth lay providers are the most. So at the moment, we have around 400 youth lay providers. And then at the middle, we have around 50 clinical supervisors. And then at the top, we have around 10 clinical experts. I'll talk more about this later. And also, we have community-based stakeholders. So we only believe that we can reach more students and people if we work with other community-based organizations. So going back to this last slide on the character strength interventions, you'll see that here we have 3 main categories of the content. So it's divided into 3 main modules. We have growth mindset, value affirmation, and gratitude. How the program is developed, you could say it's a 4-hour program, but we spread it across 4 weeks. So the first week, the students will go through growth mindset. The second week, they'll also go through growth mindset. And then the third week, they'll do gratitude, and they'll eventually finish with value affirmation. The other thing I should mention about this is before we implement the program, we start with baseline. So we go to the school. We work in schools in Kenya. We go to the school, we talk to the principal, and then we recruit the school. After we recruit the school, we go to the school and we do an information session where we tell them about the program, if they're interested in it, what are the benefits of the program, and then the students register for the program. So it's purely voluntary. We don't use the administration to ensure that the students attend the sessions. We try to ensure that the students know what they are getting into, even before we collect the data. So we collect baseline, and then we do growth mindset, and the growth mindset 1 and 2, and then we do midpoint. After that, we do gratitude and value affirmation, and then we do an endpoint. So all of our work is based on science, and it's really important to ensure that we are following all the protocols, we register our studies, and we ensure integrity in the studies and in the delivery of the program. So as you can see here, this is one of our programs being implemented. It's implemented in a group setup, and we have this, oh, sorry. This one is, he's our co-founder, but normally it should be a fellow or the lay provider there. And then the students sit in groups of 8 to 15 students. So how it's usually implemented, it's an after-school program where after the classes end at around 4 p.m. So the sessions run from 4 to 5 p.m. The fellows are usually 19 to 22 years old, and they are delivering it to students who are between 13 to 18 years old. So from there, you can see it's more appropriate. They understand each other. They are closer to age instead of having a psychologist or psychiatrist who is 20 years older than the students. They don't understand the student well. These are our results. So from our studies, you can see this is at least 24% improvement or reduction in symptoms of anxiety, 29% improved social relationships, 24% depression reduced by 24%, anxiety by 29%, and social relationships improved by 24%. And we can also see the grades improved by 2.5%. And the other one is another study that we conducted, and it also shows a reduction of symptoms of anxiety and depression. So this is how it looks like. It goes down, and then it goes a bit up after some follow-up from this graph. We also did a control with study skills. So how we did this study is we had a number of students, 205 students received the Shamiri intervention, and then 208 received the study skills. That's how we were able to see the difference between the people who received the Shamiri intervention and the ones who received the study skills, which was the control group. Yeah, this is more about our results. And then this is our model. This model makes me really proud of working in Shamiri Institute, because I've never seen any organization with this kind of model. And how we do this is we have supervised youth lay providers. These are people who are aged between 19 to 22 years old. They are trained on basic psychopathology, trainings, basic facilitation skills, and psychological first aid. So these are more of our frontline workers, if you could call them that, because they're the ones who interact with the students directly. And what happens is if they go to the school and they identify some cases, maybe they're talking in a group setup and they notice that, oh, some students have some symptoms, or they're not talking that much, or even a student can approach them and tell them, oh, I need help. What happens is they usually refer them to the clinical supervisors, and these are people who have a bachelor's degree in clinical psychology or psychiatry, and also have around 2 or 3 years experience. So they have more experience than the lay providers. If that case is extreme, we've had really serious cases like suicidality or other serious and confidential cases. They are referred to the clinical experts. So the experts are people who have 10, 20 years experience in the field, and they are widely known in the market for providing specialized services. Yeah, this is a pattern of how we operate. So we start from the school recruitment, and how we do this is we map out according to the region. So we try and ensure we are expanding outside our region, or we are not only focusing on one region. So if we were based in Pescara, we'd select 5 schools in Pescara, 5 schools in Rome, 5 schools in Milan, and something like that. And then we'll go there and we'll talk to the principal. We'll tell them about our program. After that, we will formalize the school partnership through an agreement. And then we do teacher recruitment. So we tell the teacher what the program is about, because you'll find sometimes the teacher wants to even participate and listen into the session. So we are like, just give us the space, because if you are a teacher and you come to the sessions, the students will not participate as we want them to participate. But we always ensure that we stick to what we've said, and our training is very rigorous because we want to ensure that we are implementing as we had promised with the school during the partnership. And after that, we also talk to the parents and we also talk to the students. We tell them about our programs and they sign up for the program. And that's when they do the baseline. After that, we do the implementation, which takes 4 weeks. And then after that, we can either track clinical cases. They're usually not that many. Maybe it depends with where the school is. You can go to a school and there are no clinical issues, but some schools you'll find there are many clinical issues. It just depends with where they are. If there are clinical issues, they are triaged to the supervisors and then triaged to the clinical network. If there aren't any issues, we try and set up Thrive clubs. Thrive clubs are just like clubs, like a music club in the school, but now for psychology. This has been a challenge for us. So we are looking for partners who can help us to set up these clubs. We've been talking to various organizations on how they've been able to maintain robust clubs in schools. The other thing we are thinking about is digital support for students, schools, and parents. What happened with this one, we have a digital intervention, but we also thought about these students, when they finish, they go to university, they go to college, they might need mental health support. So we came up with an app. We've developed an app, it's called Rafi. People can download the app and access services virtually. Yeah. So our intervention is less expensive, or it's cheaper than alternatives in the US or in Kenya, just because we are using lay providers as the primary point of care. This maps out our reach, and it ended at 2021 here, but I can confirm that in 2023 we've reached 35,000 students and counting. Yeah, this is our leadership team. Our co-founder, Tom, sent his regards. Yeah, this is our board. This is our roadmap. Yeah, and this is our program. It's called Pretext. I'll briefly talk about it. So Pretext is an art-based intervention delivered in schools. Initially, it was an after-school program where we trained the lay providers to go to the school and implement the program. And then we realized that, oh, actually it can be implemented in the classroom. So we had to train teachers to become facilitators, and the teachers are now implementing Pretext in their classes. And how Pretext works is, it's meant to, the main goal of Pretext was to enable students to be more interested in reading, to make reading more fun. But surprisingly, we found it also increased confidence, it improved their mental health, it improved teamwork. So we found all these impressive results with Pretext. And what Pretext does is a teacher will select a text that they want to use. It can be algebra, it can be physics, it can be any text. And then when they go to the class, they will ask a volunteer to read the text out loud. And when their volunteer is reading the text out loud, the other students are supposed to be drawing or doodling, anything that comes to their mind. And then when they finish drawing or doodling, the teacher now gives the students the text to read and come up with a question. So the students now have the opportunity to interact with the text for the first time after listening to it from another person, and they get to ask a question to the text. So it can be any random questions. After that, the students now exchange the questions among themselves and try to answer the other person's question. So we call it adopting a question. And it's really interesting because you find a student has just seen this text for the first time. they are now supposed to come up with a question, so it's sparking also interest in them. And all of a sudden, they're now supposed to answer a question to content that they are interacting with it for the first time. After that, they are asked, what did we do? And this, in this exercise, every student is supposed to answer what they did. So they can say it helps them to improve their confidence, public speaking skills. So every student contributes and say what they did. And then after that, they're asked to do like an art activity. So you'll find some students will choose to sing, to dance, and it's really funny because students will come up with a play about diffusion or like a random topic, something you thought would never be like a play or a song, and they really have fun in the class when they're doing that. So that's what we call a pretext cycle. It's really exciting. And from this exercise specifically, this is one of the photos we use a lot because you can see the curiosity in the students when they are looking at other people's questions. So these are questions that have been hanged on a clothesline and they've been answered by other students. So it's a really good program. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you very much, John, for the project and all the results that you achieved. So there is next speaker, Fulvio D'Acquisto from Roehampton University.
I want to start by thanking again Pierluigi and Claudio. I wish I could have 1 hour to talk, not about me, but about the topic, because I'm very passionate about this. And I'll go straight to the topic, which is affective immunology. If you try to Google it, you won't find anything, mainly because I invented it. And the reason why I invented it is because there was nothing in research about it. So just to give you a brief idea of what affective immunology is all about, is basically trying to understand how emotion and feeling impact immune response. When I talk about emotion and feelings, I'm talking about kissing someone, laughing, crying, something very short, so an emotion, an affect, rather than a mood. And this is quite important because one of the key aspects of affective immunology is that the immune system is the mirror of what you feel right now. Now, you might want to say, why would you say that? I mean, why would you pick the immune system? And when I talk, when I teach immunology, I always say to my students, there are two tissues in the body that have memory. One is the brain, which we all focus about, but the other one is the immune system. That's why we vaccinate. And this is rather important because both the immune system and the brain share a sensing function. Did you see COVID around? No, you didn't. Did you see infection around? No, you didn't. What it does is the immune system. So while the brain senses what we can see with the senses, the immune system senses what we can't see, right? So they need to work in the same way. For today's talk, I'm just going to focus on two aspects which are probably regularly neglected, and that would be what we've been talking about from other speakers. So the positive effect, positive emotion on the immune system, and then I'll launch on to loneliness. I'm not going to talk about the other two aspects, which I would love to, but there is no time. So the basic idea is very simple. When you talk about the environment and the immune system, all you hear is stress. It's all negative. It's all very detrimental, which obviously it is. But there's more than that. And that was my first question. So my first question is, how can I actually study how positive emotion influences the immune system? On top of that, of course, I needed to use evidence-based. So I can't use humans because humans, they are different. They are there is very subjective response. So in other words, I have to use another more sort of homologous, homogeneous population. And so I ended up being, I always been, by training, a pharmacologist, so I'm a mouse doctor, I use mice, with the idea that if I can make the mice happy, then I will be able to make humans happy. But before I go there, I just want to say what you already know, that we have plenty of references showing the negative effect of a certain lifestyle on the immune system. And that, again, will be the key point that everybody is trying to address. And in my case, I wanted to start, as I said, with trying to differentiate positive versus negative emotion. Stress is not always negative. Stress is extremely positive. It could be extremely positive even for the immune system. So how do we tackle this and how do we do it? And especially what I've been trying to do is trying to understand at the cellular and molecular level how this positive effect work. So what do you do? This is very funny to do in the UK. You take a sad house or flat from someone living in London, and then you give them a posh house. This is the cage of a rat, which is 3 times bigger. Then you give the toys, the spa, lots of maids, lots of friends, and food all over the place. The castle, they can go around and chase themselves. And it's very, very cool. I must say, this is a very, very, sharp contrast from my daily living in this cage. And the reason why I use this is that this is the system the neuroscientists use to show how your brain develops. If you put a mouse in a rich environment, you have more neurons. So I just use the same thing for the brain, for the human system. So I gave them 2 weeks in this cage. They basically stay there for 2 weeks. Change the cage only 1, and on that there is a lot to be said. And of course, I'm not going to bore you with all the science data. I just want to show you here this graph. You can see that there is a bit of a difference there. And what it is basically an increased number of immune cells in the mice that have been for 2 weeks in a rich environment. So basically what I've done is to give them an infection, then I went to the site of infection, collect immune cells, and count them. So to speak, I'm making this very simple. And what was very interesting is that we found more cells in the rich environment mice. This is normally considered a negative thing in the world of immunology, because if you have more immune cells, then you have chronic inflammation, and then everything is bad. But in reality, it's not always how it looks. So what we did to show that is that we give them an infection. So I just injected bacteria in their bloodstream, and then I measured basically how the bacteria spread around the body. Imagine that you have a bacteremia all over the place. So this is the plate of the blood collected from normal mouse and then a rich mouse. And you can tell that the bacteria were almost absent in rich mice. So in other words, I gave these mice 2 weeks of a posh house with lots of friends and toys, and I got the same effect of an antibiotic. Didn't give them anything, any drug, any gene, all things that I've done. I have to clarify, this is all I've done for 30 years of my life. So this, if you want, is the triumph of my failure over 30 years. And so that was quite remarkable because, again, it shows that basically by changing the environment, you got more immune cells in circulation. If you have a bacteremia, if you have a bacterial infection, you have more soldiers fighting the fight, and therefore you are better. So that's the summary. This is the normal cage, this is the rich cage, and then what you see is you have more immune cells circulating, better defense. Now, what do we do in science? Again, for evidence-based medicine, is, okay, you put that in, remove it all together, and see what happens. But before I start to show you the effect of a rich environment, of removing the enrichment from the mice. I just want to show you the impact that this had at the time of publication. So of course, the Brits and probably even us, European, the first thing they did, they picked up the news and they say, oh, 2 weeks holidays. The mice have been on holidays for 2 weeks and they are better. So let's have 4 weeks holidays because it's good for our health. And actually, it was good. I mean, it was a good way to publicize the concept. Massive interest. Got something like 250 mails about should I go on holiday or not, and try to deal with that. It was quite interesting. And generally speaking, we do know that there is a huge interest in finding ways to strengthen the immune system. We've been talking about inclusivity in this meeting, and I want to show you 2 other venues whereby this simple concept has been taken. One thing that you would be surprised, especially my connational Italians, a German-Romanian group has come up with this fantastic idea of terme. So basically, they took the Roman spa terme, and they created these amazing facilities for which I've been a consultant. And when you go there, I must tell you, it's mind-blowing. The trees are real, they're not plastic. The heat comes from geothermic heat, so that 0 cost. The steam for the glass comes from the geothermic heat. They use the water pool to then water other things, so there is a lots of recycling. This place, now in Bucharest, obviously, has now been kind of franchised everywhere. But what I really like about them is that they chose, they came to England, where would they go? London. No, London had enough of everything, so they go to people with lower income. So Manchester, I apologize if there is any Mancunian in the audience, is still a very, very big city, but certainly less than London in terms of the money-making machine. And the ticket is £15. You can go with the discounted price as an adult or with children. And the idea is, again, to provide those people that, let's face it, they haven't got the sun of Pescara or the seaside that we've seen this morning, and give them the opportunity throughout the year to basically enjoy a bit of wellness. Now, I've been taking blood, or the program is about taking blood before and after the visit to show that on that single visit, your immune system can change. So a 4-hour visit can actually impact the way your immune system change. And we have all sorts of programs which are very interesting. I named just one, in vitro fertilization for women, very difficult time, very stressful. So we want to test the effect of 1 week of spa during the IVF to dampen down the immune system, foster fertilization, and so on and so forth. So it's very exciting, very, very approachable, and finally we can move from mice to real people. Is it only people? No. With a sort of group of people in the veterinary school, we're now trying to design what I call the anti-inflammatory sausages. And what it is basically is just giving a rich environment to farm animals. And believe it or not, when you look at the meat of these animals, they are much more enriched in nutrients which are positive for the health of the human being, of the consumer. So in one go, in a way, you make the animal feel better and also the user feel, let's say, more healthy. Now, going back to loneliness, so the polar opposite of enrichment, this for us in the UK was a huge, it's a huge problem. I'm sure that you're aware, I mean, it's not just the UK, but we have a huge expenditure for loneliness. And we were among the first country to have a minister for loneliness, which sadly then she was attacked and killed. But again, there's been lots of discussion around this, and very silly idea. This is a toy that is basically something you can cuddle and talks to you, and should supplement friendliness in case loneliness is too much. So loads and loads of interesting story. So we did the same thing. We isolate the mice. We put them one by one, with the space in between so they don't see each other, and they were, in the same period of 2 weeks, lonely. So the antibacterial effect was exactly the same. However, this time, what did change is that the mediator of inflammation were increased. So rather than increasing the cells, the soldier, we had an increase in the weapon. And those things are the ones that actually cause inflammation, they are killing us. So as a mouse or a human being or a live being along a situation of danger, so the immune system has to respond to that. So I have to compensate for that and kill everything that comes along very effectively. However, being like this forever obviously has a different effect. So the same paradigm, if you like, well, two opposite paradigms, they function in a completely different way, and this is much detrimental. This is the cause of Alzheimer's, dementia, because lonely people are always immune activated. That's how it basically works. So that's the difference, is that the enrichment, you have more cellularity. Here you have more soluble mediators. And obviously, the next thing that I have to fight is the usual one. Oh, it's just stress. It's cortisol. Okay. Yes, it is stress and cortisol, but it's not only that. And so we actually investigated, is there a sort of master switch in the genome that you can turn on and turn off, and you are happy or you're sad? Or there are two different switches, one for loneliness and one for happiness. Well, it turns out, again, I want to reiterate, enrichment and social isolation, I didn't give any drugs. I just changed the cage. And the changes gene expression is completely different and is massive. So we do have specific genes that are activated by enrichment, as we have specific genes that are activated by social isolation. So this is not just an hormonal effect. It goes at the level of our DNA, which is why I've been lucky enough to find Claudio in my scientific life. So what are the next steps? Unfortunately, I had to give in with the bad. I have a couple of data, and I'm not going to show you. I did a study on massage, and I showed how massages well. I did a study on changing the blanket, the textile in the hospital. It could shorten the length of the staying in the hospital, but people want to hear the bad thing. So right now we're doing a study on social fear. You expose a mouse to the urine of a fox, which has never seen in his life, and yet they have a stressful response, and so we're looking at how that impacts the inflammation. And then we're doing all sorts of allegedly nasty, so this will be your commuting in the train or in the tube if you are in London. So again, this sort of very short period of time where you have the armpit of the person just in your face for 30 minutes of commuting. We're working on social defeat, so the aggression that comes from the boss, the colleague, and even in a sort of forgetful mother. So this is a mother that gives rise to the pups, and she can't take care of them because there's basically ventilation. The pups are cold, she feels frustrated, and she kills them all. And all of this, basically, when you go one by one, and you look at the gene that are activated by these things, they're all different. So now you can see why this conference for me is so important, because it's basically giving meat to the bone, as we say in English, and probably do something about it. I'm providing the evidence, and this probably will allow us also to stratify. So the idea, again, you've seen this in many other parts of my colleagues' excellent talk before mine. There are more than one way to control inflammation in this case. And this is really what I think we should be moving forward. So a personalized medicine, I hate to say this, not a randomized control, but please take my word with really, really big caution. All I'm saying is we should stratify differently. You go to the doctor, you first meet a social scientist, which classify you, then you do the scientist stuff. So basically, it's just trying to have a better understanding of what are before the social determinants of health and how to use them in a translational way. And with that, I just want to thank a number of people that present or absent. Claudio, you look much younger there. Yeah, wow. But that's the rich environment effect. when we were doing that, you were enriched as well. So now we're doing social isolation, you feel the effect, and you.
That's right.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Fulvio, for the affective immunology story.
Yeah.
So we have to move to the next one, last speaker, Francesca Ferri from University of Chieti.
Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Francesca Ferri, and I'm very happy to be part of this meeting, and I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Slides are not coming. I can start to tell you that I have I'm very much interested in interoception and how interoception impacts on several mental processes and on human well-being and mental health. So in the first part of this talk, I will focus on interoception. And in the second part of this talk, towards the end of this talk, I will briefly delve into the intriguing aspects of how cultural factors can impact on interoceptive contributions to well-being and human well-being and mental health. My research falls within the very general framework of embodied cognition, according to which mental processes are embodied. Hence, they depend upon functions of the body and not only on functions of the brain. But which are these body functions that are relevant for embodied cognition? We can distinguish between exteroceptive function and interoceptive functions. The original concept of embodied cognition emerged when mirror neurons were discovered and simulation theory were proposed by Vittorio Gallese, Giacomo Rizzolatti, but we will hear about that tomorrow directly from Vittorio Gallese. Basically, exteroceptive, the first dimension of embodied cognition related to exteroceptive function focuses on how we process, how we perceive, and interact with the external world through exteroceptive senses, and especially through sensory motor functions. Interoception, on the other hand, focuses on visceral functions, so on how our internal organs, inputs from our internal organs reaching our brain affects our mental processes. This second domain of embodied cognition emerged only recently and has been much less studied than the exteroceptive contribution to embodied cognition. And you can see, in fact, how from the very first proposal of the concept of interoception, actually only recently studies on interoception developed only in the very years. But what is interoception? The first definition of the concept of interoception was provided by Sherrington in 1948. And he defined interoception as the body-to-brain axis of sensation concerning the state of the visceral organs. Later, in 2018, brain, Khalsa provided a more comprehensive definition of interoception as the process by which the nervous system senses, but also interprets and integrates signals originating from within the body, providing a moment-by-moment mapping of the body's internal landscape across conscious and unconscious levels. But this definition suggests that interoception may play a critical role in maintenance of homeostatic functioning, body regulation, and survival. And in fact, what happens in the brain is that these interoceptive signals coming from the different organs, from heart, from lungs, and all the viscera, all these signals are not only sensed by the brain, processed in the brain, but they are also integrated with exteroceptive signals. So basically, we live in an environment which constantly changes, and also our internal body, the state of our body constantly changes. So our brain needs to integrate all this exteroceptive and interoceptive information in order to do what? To implement actions directed toward the external world, so extero actions, basically to change something in the environment that could be positive for us, for our homeostatic states, to restore our homeostatic state, but also interactions. So basically autonomic internal adjustment of our body state. So the brain regions where this where this processing and integration of interoceptive and exteroceptive signals are indicated here, and mainly actors of these processes are, for instance, the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. What happens in these regions actually is not just processing and integration of interoceptive signals, but referring to the model that has been presented earlier, the predictive coding model of the brain. What happens here is that the brain generates internal models to predict bodily sensation based on past information in the form of beliefs and expectation, and also present information. Why is this necessary? Because interoceptive signals are ambiguous, are noisy, so the brain needs to generate these predictions about the body. Why are we so interested in interoceptive signals in the context of well-being, mental health, and emotions? Because actually our ability to attend to internal signals is followed by the ability of our brain to translate interoceptive signals into balanced affects, which in turn will steer our mental processes, actions, and perception of the world. So basically, interoceptive signals are tightly linked to our emotional experiences and shape our emotional experiences. This is a quote from Lisa Barrett, that's a very well-known scientist, expert on the mechanism of human emotions. And she proposed that the human brain is anatomically structured so that no decision or action can be free of interoception and affect, no matter what fiction people tell themselves about how rational they are. Your bodily feeling right now will project forward to influence what you will feel and do in the future. So these interoceptive signals are extremely important for our emotional and affective life. This is the reason why anytime there is a disruption in our ability to attend, detect, elaborate interoceptive feelings, this will cause disruption in our mental health. So psychiatric conditions, on the other hand, are often associated to interoceptive symptoms. Physiological changes in almost every bodily system are associated with poor mental health. Just to give you an example, the prevalence of depression with cardiovascular disease. So people suffering from cardiovascular disease are at a higher risk to develop depression. But this is not the only one example. There are many examples of conditions in which interoceptive disruption trigger or facilitate the development of a mental disorder, psychiatric disorders. There are examples related to eating disorders, anxiety, and also psychosis. What is surprising is that in our Western culture, despite this evidence, current cognitive models of mental health conditions do not include a role for bodily processes. Okay? And this is more related to our culture. Okay? How can we measure interoception? Interoception is not only related to how the brain processes signals from the body, but can be measured, interoceptive processing can be measured at different levels. With interoception, we refer to the brain-body interactions, but also to something that we can measure at the behavioral and cognitive level. So at the brain level, as mentioned before, we can measure we can measure the strength of neural responses to interoceptive signals. For instance, the strength of neural responses to heartbeat, which is called heartbeat potential, that we can measure with EEG. Or we can measure this brain-body interaction by looking at the impact that this neural processing of interoceptive signals has on other cognitive and perceptual processes. For instance, how cardiac processing modulates the experience of fear. At the behavioral level, we can measure the individual ability to estimate actual physiological signals, which is called interoceptive accuracy. And for instance, we can ask participants to detect and count their heartbeats. There are direct ways to do that, but also other more implicit way to get this information. And also, at the cognitive level, there is the possibility to measure interoceptive awareness as the self-reported tendency to attend to internal changes. How much the individual tend to pay attention to internal signals. And this is important in clinical population, which is signaled by their tendency to report symptoms, bodily related symptoms. But also we can use questionnaires to assess interoceptive awareness as a trait measure in the healthy population. Now, how culture can shape interoception? There are not so many studies on that, but there are empirical evidence suggesting that this is true. It's true that culture shapes interoception. Most of evidence about that comes from the comparison between interoception in Western and Eastern cultures. For instance, there are several studies showing that non-Western cultural groups, for instance, East Asian and West Africans, are more aware of their own bodies than Western cultural groups. okay? This doesn't mean that they are more accurate. Actually, it's the opposite for reasons that there is no time to discuss here. But at least they are more aware of their body. How can this be? Which are the cultural factors shaping our interoceptive tendencies? For instance, there are different approaches in the different cultures in relation to the problem of mind-body connection. Eastern culture are characterized by these cultural beliefs and practices such as meditation, yoga, mindfulness technique, which may be culturally ingrained and can enhance interoceptive awareness in this population. Another cultural factor is related to language. Language is in fact a crucial component of culture and influence how individuals perceive and interpret bodily sensations. Languages in which we refer to the body to describe our emotions, to explain different concepts, and so on and so forth. And this tendency to refer to the body sensation when we speak is also a factor that can enhance or not the individual tendency to attend bodily sensation. And also cultural differences related to social norms and emotional expression. Some cultures promote emotional awareness and expression, enhancing internal sensation, while other cultures value emotional restraints have the opposite effect. Okay, so there are also social norms that can promote individuals' attitude towards bodily feelings and bodily sensation. These cultural factors actually can also shape the relationship between interoception and mental health. I showed you before a table showing how mental psychiatric conditions are often associated to body interoceptive disruptions. But I also told you that in Western culture, in Western medical science, there is no model taking these body-related factors into account. Why? Because in our Western medical science, the brain plays the dominant role in the body-mind relationship, so it's a cultural factor. Differently, in Eastern medicine, the body and mind form an integrated and inseparable unit, as showed in the left part of this picture. And also emotions cannot, the idea is that in this culture, the idea is that emotions can not only cause disharmony, but can also be caused by it. As you can see, emotional imbalance can cause disharmony of internal organs and not only the opposite. So as a consequence of these cultural, of these differences, of these different approaches, we can observe that in the different cultures, there are different ways in which psychological distress is expressed and experienced. For instance, compared to Western cultures, non-Western cultures are more likely to report body symptoms in the context of psychological distress. So what can we do from this evidence? Future challenges could be, for instance, to develop cultural interventions that, based on what we have learned from other cultures, could be able to promote individuals' awareness and attention towards their bodies and interoceptive symptoms. And another important challenge is to improve the way we can measure objectively the impact of this cultural intervention on our well-being and mental health. So we should develop and identify specific interoceptive measures that can effectively capture the changes and improvements resulting from, eventually resulting from cultural interventions. And with this proposal, I